Good morning, friends. Welcome to Dream Big Today. My name is Debbie, and this is July the 5th. This is wonderful Wednesday. This is the greatest Wednesday ever, right? Because we're here. So I'm glad that you joined me. And if you would put your prayer request and your praise reports in the chat box. And our dear friend Donna records all of them in the prayer journal. And so we can just be in the ditches with you praying. And then even better is whenever we get to celebrate what God has done in your life. And so that's awesome. I hope that you had a great day yesterday, that you enjoyed your freedom on Independence Day and celebrated just, our nation, what God has done through our nation. It's so important to remember God and the nation together. Folks, we got to pray for our nation. In my devotion today, it says, "Gracious God, you are so great, glorious, and compassionate that it's impossible to praise or thank you too much. You inhabit the praises of your people, and I delight in drawing near you through worship." Let's worship and praise him today. Just, get up with that song in your heart. Now that I've been focusing on that several times, I've woke up with a new song in my heart. I say a new song. It's not the same one from yesterday. It is a different song than I had the day before, and that is absolutely awesome. So I want to tell you just quickly what I did yesterday. We went to the movies yesterday afternoon, and we saw Sound of Freedom. And it was the opening day for it. I don't know if you've heard a lot about it. I hope you have, and I hope you go watch it. It's a difficult movie, and it's about child trafficking. And you know what? We left there not with a real warm, fuzzy feeling, but with high awareness of what is actually going on in our country. And folks, with that awareness, we've got to pray for our children. There are tons of little ones being kidnapped and used into the sex trafficking and just shipped all over the world. They're scared, they're afraid. There's moms and dads that have no clue where their babies have gone. So we've got to pray and keep that on the forefront of this. We're getting ready to read into our word today in First Chronicles 1 through chapter 2:17. We're reading about like our lineage, people that have struggled, people that names we've never heard of, that's not written anymore in the Bible, but it just shows us that God is with people everywhere they go. We need to be remember that, because we want to pray. All of us pray together about the moral decline of our nation, the evil that's going on. And just as Second Chronicles 7:14 says, "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and forgive their sin and will heal their land." Let me flip over to, I hit the wrong spot. Oh, mercy. Oh, there we go. Jeremiah 29:7. "Also seek the peace and prosperity of the city which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper." Pray for our nation, pray for our city, pray for everybody that is involved in making decisions and going and seeking and rescuing these kids. We got to pray for our border, the walls, the patrol, everything about that, because there are kids being grabbed right and left. Eileen, I thought I did say nations. Maybe I didn't, but we pray for our nations and our, down to our city, because kids can be taken out of our city too. It's a tearjerker. It is very, very well done, and I really encourage you to go see this movie. All right, let's jump into the word this morning. And so this starts with, as you see, Adam. The genealogies are important. Every name is in here because God knew them. We can go to, like on Memorial Day, when we go to the cemeteries and decorate the graves, and we can see there are some unknown graves there with no names. Nobody knew that person, or, or just maybe just a simple little, year and a name, and not know a whole lot about him. But the thing is, God knows every single thing about him, just like this man that did this rescue of the children, that quit his job to go do that. There'll come a day that his name will just be on a tombstone, and maybe there's going to be people that's not going to know a lot about him. But let me tell you, the man impacted many people. God chose him for just as time as this. He's chosen us too. We have a part to play. And if it's not getting out and going and grabbing them away from the traffickers, it is to pray for everybody to change their ways and protect our children. I'm getting chills again talking about it. But we'll get back into this word today. So the writer was inspired, the chroniclers inspired by God to mention this whole entire lineage, and with a specific purpose. And my note says, just think about it. Cain and Abel are missing from this, but the focus is historically on King David and his dynasty after him. So you're not going to see a whole lot about this. There's going to be little tidbits in there. You see that it mentions Noah and his sons, which is the survivors of the flood. And this is why we read the Bible, because the ones the Bible talks about it historically, we know their backstory. Then it talks about Noah's sons, Japheth. Well, his group probably was somewhere around the Europe and Northern Asia area. Then on down to Ham. They populated Africa and Far East. Then there's Shem. I didn't make a note of where they were from. And then we pop over into the sons of Abraham. I mean, it just goes and goes and goes. And all of these names demonstrate the reality of prior generations and our connection to them, and God's broader plan, walking through a graveyard, basically. Because, whether or not we thought, we probably thought whenever we read about Judah and Tamar that's a horrible story, that would just go south at any time. But look what came out of that. There's a whole lot of good things to remember. And you know what, as you go through and read the stories about all of these folks, maybe go back and see where they sat in the lineage. One of my other notes was talking about Judah, the family of, to the family of Jesse and the father of David. There were 12 sons of Israel and 13 tribes from the 12 sons. And the chronicler decides to start the lineage with Judah. And so that's interesting. But it goes on down and look at verse 15. His seventh was David. So we get on down there to Boaz, Obed, Jesse, and then David. And it's interesting. It's interesting whenever you start looking and remembering the names and how significant all of that was. So I am going to jump on over to Acts this morning. I love everything about what's going on with Paul. And now that I saw that movie yesterday, I'm thinking, man, Paul was brave. This guy and this is the Sound of Freedom is a true story. That man was super brave. So in Acts 23:11, it starts with, that night the Lord appeared to Paul and said, "Be encouraged, Paul. Just as you have been a witness to me here in Jerusalem, you must preach the good news in Rome as well." What's that? I mean, at night, Jesus came to him. Paul wasn't alone. In another version, it will say, the Lord stood near Paul. And I like that. He was present. He's at his side. And that's not just like a singular time. He's there with us all the time as believers. He's always with us. In fact, in Matthew 28:20, at the end of that verse, it says, "Lo, I am with you always, even to the end of age." He is always spiritually present with believers. Now, to go back to that movie again, as after watching that and reading my Bible study, I thought this man was a Christian man that did all of these dangerous things, and he would have been prayed through. Jesus was with him, just like Jesus was with Paul, to go into those jungles, into those horrible locations, to pull out kids, risked his life. Well, Paul has been beaten and shipwrecked and everything like that. He has experienced this, and we think that would only happen, in our Bible, but man, oh man, we still have some troopers today they're in the army of God. Let's join them at least in prayer, if nothing else. Now, it goes on to say in verse 12, the next morning, now, that night, Jesus has appeared to him and encouraged him. And man, I think, wow, that was dynamite. He was with, and what a charge he got to his spirit with a word directly from Jesus. Because the next morning, here's the Jews, they're all getting around, and they've bound themselves with an oath. They're not going to eat or drink anything until they kill Paul. Well, that's certainly motivation. If I think that I'm not going to eat or drink anything until I do something, well, I'm going to scramble around and get that fast, because here in just a little bit, it's going to be time to cook breakfast. I am going to, Jan, The Sound of Freedom is the name of that movie. Jan just asked what was the name of the movie. Sound of Freedom just came out yesterday. So I would be scrambling to get whatever done. But now then here's something evil going on. And it's this conspiracy. They gathered 40 people together, convinced the priest and the elders. So we see that the priests and the elders weren't godly people. It sounds like, oh, you're going to the priest. That sounds like that ought to be a man of God. Well, it should be, but it wasn't in this case. It's kind of like what I read one guy say, that it's like that these guys were today's suicide bombers. The hatred runs so deep that they will lose their own life for a chance to kill one of their enemies. And what enemy is this? I mean, Paul was preaching the gospel. It wasn't like that he was running around kidnapping their kids. He was preaching. But they've got a plan in place. They're getting after this. So they said, pretend you want to examine this case more fully, and we'll kill him on the way. So they're going to be taking him to another place. So, verse 16. This is one of those small miracles. But Paul's nephew, his sister's son, heard their plan and went to the fortress and told Paul. We don't see a whole lot about Paul's family. And this is the first time we see anything about it. And possibly his family may have disowned him after his conversion on the road. But the nephew is there, and Paul called for one of the Roman officers and said, "Take this young man to the commander. He has something important to tell them." And remember that Paul has the assurance from the Lord that he will eventually arrive safely at God. I'm thinking God. He will arrive safely at Rome. Paul's action is to make sure the Roman commander is informed. See, Paul was involved in that. He talked to one of the Roman officers, and you know what? You can imagine Paul never wasted any time of breathing. He's probably already preached to this Roman officer he called, that he's probably built a relationship with him for him to call that officer to say, "Take this young man. He has something important to tell." So he validated this is important. This isn't just a riddle or anything like that, or how much the price of gas is down the road. He says he's got something important to tell. So the officer did, explaining that Paul, the prisoner, called me over and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you. This was probably a respect of Paul's Roman citizenship also. He did what he was asked to do. The commander took him by the hand and led him and asked, "What is it you want to tell me?" Now, so it doesn't say how old this nephew is. It says he's a young man. But it makes me think, whenever you look and when you read that the commander took his hand and led him, well, I take my 6-year-old grandson by the hand and lead him. I don't necessarily take my 20-year-old grandson by the hand and lead him. So I feel like that, with that statement, that he's pretty young. And so the young children have a role to play. Everything about any, whatever stage of life you're in, God can use you. Took him by the hand. He was old enough to relate a believable story. Excuse me. Paul's nephew told him, "Some of the Jews are going to ask you to bring Paul here before the high council tomorrow, pretending that they want to get some more information. But don't do it. There are more than 40 men hiding along the way to ambush him, and they vowed not to eat or drink until they've killed him. They are ready now, just waiting for your consent." And the commander listened. He listened to him. It was believable. And Paul sent him. So the commander had probably heard Paul speak too. So he's warning him, don't say anything to anybody. And I think that's interesting too. This is another example of God working behind the scenes and protecting the message and the little boy. So in verse 23, then the commander called 2 of his officers and ordered, "Get 200 soldiers ready to leave for Caesarea at 9:00 tonight. And not just 200 soldiers, get 200 spearmen. And not just 200 soldiers and 200 spearmen, let's get 70 mounted troops. And provide horses for Paul to ride to get him safely to Governor Felix." Oh my word. Look at that. Paul is supposed to go to Rome, and he's in jail, And so it's like, how am I going to get there? I mean, he could have thought all day long, oh man, Jesus told me I'm going to go there and I must preach there. Here I am. What do I have to do? But you know what? It wasn't anything Paul had to do other than make sure that his little nephew got to the commander and encouraged him to go. 470 trained Roman soldiers would escort Paul out of Jerusalem. And just think about that. Jesus has appeared to him and has told him what he's going to do. Now then, whether or not Paul probably didn't worry about anything. He probably just slept well because that's Paul. But this is like the Lord exaggerating the protection of having almost 500 men, soldiers, the elite, surrounding Paul on horses so he can get there quicker and completely safe. We limit God, folks. We limit God. We think, well, oh man, that this has to be done. I can't save any kids from trafficking, from the sex slave, market. Oh, but your prayers can be going up into heaven right now, and it is coming down on a person like this Tim that did all of this stuff to just send protection around him as he goes through the jungles of the worst place of the worst places. But remember Jesus's words in Acts 23:11, be encouraged. You must preach the good news in Rome. So Jesus told him that he will be in Rome, but what's going to happen? He's going to be taken, escorted. This is like the biggest holy parade you've ever seen in your life. 500 soldiers protecting Paul. Absolutely amazing. And then the commander wrote this note and they started out like who it's from, so you wouldn't wonder till you got to the end of the letter. But he said, from Claudius Lysias to His Excellency Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by some Jews and they were about to kill him, and when I arrived with the troops, when I learned he was a Roman citizen, I removed him to safety. Oh man, pat me on the back. Felix was very high in the Roman hierarchy. When we see what Claudius is doing, he's painting himself in a good light because he's such a good commander. He hasn't almost beat Paul to death or had him whipped with chains. Well, he wants to appear that he had. Maybe we should say that. He leaves out that part. But the rest of the summary is accurate, pretty accurate. It tells what he needed it to be told to Governor Felix. So in verse 31, that night, as ordered, the soldiers took Paul as far as Antipatris. They returned to the fortress the next morning. So halfway or so there, they were with him through the most dangerous area where there were rebels and people that would just kill you because they just wanted to. They didn't have nothing to do. They lost their deck of cards so in the wind, so they just went and killed people. The mounted troops took him on to Caesarea. So after spending time with Jesus, Paul's guarded by the Roman soldiers, but we can't quit saying that. We have to be sure, or we can be sure, that Paul didn't waste any time sharing the good news with these soldiers. I bet that man, I mean, he didn't even have to pay any attention to where he was going. He's sitting on that horse and he is just turning around on his horse like he was on a swivel seat preaching the whole way. So, the 200 peeled off. And so it looks like maybe it was all 400 soldiers and we only have the 70 mounted ones. That's still a bunch of people, but now then they're in a safer area, so they're going on. And that's pretty cool. But I want to stop. I had another verse in here. Remember back in Acts 9:15, Jesus said, "Go, for Saul is my chosen instrument to take my message to the Gentiles and to kings as well to the people of Israel." So where's he going now? He's going to get the Excellency Governor Felix. See, he's gotten these little tidbits and words all the way through here. They presented Paul and the letter to Governor Felix. He read it and then asked Paul, what province was he from? Cilicia, Paul answered. I will hear your case myself when your accusers arrive, the governor told him. Then the governor ordered him kept in the prison at Herod's headquarters. So that ends our reading about Paul today. Like Nancy said earlier, whenever we were texting, it's a cliffhanger. It's like that show that you watch and it just ends at like, oh man, why didn't we see what happened? Well, we'll read what happened, but this begins a 2-year period of confinement for Paul in Caesarea. Taken together with travel time, the next 5 years of Paul's life were lived in Roman custody. So that verse in Acts 9:15, that was like 20 years earlier. He's still walking through what God had planned for him to do. And so, you know what, whenever we think, oh man, we heard something from God 15 years ago and it's not come to pass, I must have heard wrong. But that's not the case. It's not our timing, it's God's timing. And Paul never sat back and waited. He was highly educated. He was skilled. He was just an amazing man, going from his times of being a persecutor of Christians to becoming the persecuted Christian. And it's a great story. Study more about Paul, and we'll be back tomorrow with some more. But I want to go on into Psalms 3:1-8. And this is the theme on this one is trusting God for protection and peace. And man, I tell you what, back to that movie again. Our kiddos need to know the word. They need to know that Jesus is with them no matter what happens to them. The people that go out in the servicemen that's defending our country, I hope they all have a Bible in their backpack so they can be encouraged in reading every day that they go out into the battlefield. The missionaries have got their Bible with them so they can go out and preach. Verse 1 says, "Oh Lord, I have so many enemies and so many are against me." And you know what? When you start mentioning the word of God, you're going to have people come against you because they're going to say, God is love and God is love, but God's love is not what you are calling love. So many are saying God will never rescue him, but you, oh Lord, are a shield around me. You are my glory, the one who holds my head up high. I cried out to the Lord and he answered me from his holy mountain. Verse 5, I lay down and slept, yet I woke up in safety, for the Lord was watching over me. I highlighted that one. I have little highlights in my Bible, if you can see that. I'm not afraid of 10,000 enemies who surround me on every side. See that Tim that went in to rescue this little girl, this little boy, rescued this little boy, and that's part of the thing that you can see. So that I'm not giving anything up, but he rescues this little boy from the slavery, only to find out the little boy tells him, "What about my sister?" He's got a sister that's been taken. This man wasn't afraid of 10,000 enemies who did surround him on every side. Arise, O Lord, rescue me, my God. Slap all my enemies in the face, shatter the teeth of the wicked. Victory comes from you, O Lord. May you bless your people. Man, we need to have this prayer. This is our prayer today. You know what? You know, we just, the enemies, the evil that's in this world. Slap them in the face, God. Get their attention. Change their hearts. Change them. Be aware. Oh, Cassie, you saw it too. Cassie is saying, if you don't see that they saw it, and it was powerful to be aware and full of prayer. I came away different, Cassie, from that. I felt like that, you know, I was aware anyway, but it just brought it to a deeper understanding. We need to learn. We need to be equipped. We need to get in the Word, study every day, so we can continue in a deeper relationship with God, and to know how we need to pray. In Proverbs 18:14 through 15, the one statement in there I'm going to read, it says, intelligent people are always ready to learn. Their ears are open for knowledge. I want to have my ears open. I want to continue learning. I want to hear what my role is in praying for our nation, our country, our city, and for the children. The children are depending on us. And so, folks, if you get a chance, go see it. It's an awareness. But I love you, and I'm so glad that you joined us today. And oh, Rita says Tim Ballard's organization is an amazing place to donate. Yes, I guarantee you that would be. I'm going to have to look that up today. All right. I love you. You have a great day, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.